Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents and US history and everything in between. Today, I want to continue with my discussion on whistleblowing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the lens of two movies that deal with whistleblowing. Um, All the President's Men. It was done in 1976. It's regarding the Watergate scandal. Uh, so the Watergate episode is often classified as, it's often, I'm not going to use the word classified because, because of the nature of what we're talking about. By the way, everything I'm discussing is unclassified, it's declassified. None of it is classified. This is in the public domain. I had to do that because I hold a TSSCI, top secret clearance, and of course, I've worked in the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, and the Department of the Navy. And it's interesting because I I've done a video explaining what whistleblowing is. And of course, everything I've been experiencing is a result of whistleblowing. Again, whistleblowing is legal, right? It's legal for all federal employees. It's since been expanded, but doing it from the lens of 1778, right? The 1778 July 30th Whistleblower Protection Act, which was the first whistleblower protection law in the world, right? So hey, America, we lead the way, don't we? So again, anytime you report some form of wrongdoing, misconduct, fraud, any form of wrongdoing, report it through the appropriate channels in the government. That's called whistleblowing, and you're protected because to make sure that your boss or the agency you work for, the government, does not retaliate against you. Because let me remind us of the I'm going to remind us of the text of the first whistleblower protection law. Very quick, I'm going to read it just to let you see that yes, whistleblowing is actually legal. The films I'm discussing today, the public describes them as whistleblowing, but those are actually called leaks, right? They're leaks, and like the instance of Chelsea Manning. You see, Chelsea Manning was actually prosecuted and went to prison. Um, Edward Snowden. And in this case, today I'm discussing Mark Felt. That was a leak, right? He got away with it, and I'm going to explain the context through the movies. I'm going to explain what happened, the background, what happened through these movies. I'm using these movies today because America, this is the land of Hollywood. I might as well. We love to get knowledge, information through Hollywood, through movies, and then these are two great movies. That's All the President's Men, starring Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford. Robert Redford is late now, and may so rest in peace. And then the other person, of course, the other film is Mark Felt, the man who brought down the White House. Mark Felt, which stars one of my favorite actors, Liam Neeson. I think that was done in 2017. So I've watched these two movies, and they deal with the same person. So Mark Felt was known as Deep Throat. Deep Throat. Ironically, Deep Throat was actually a 1972 film, so it was done around that time. That was a code that the journalists gave him. Deep Throat. It was the name of a pornographic movie, right? It actually sounds salacious, doesn't it? Deep Throat. But let me quickly read the text just to show you that. Whistleblowing is not like leaks, right? Leaks are actually prosecutable, right? They're crimes, right? But this whistleblowing is protected, and this is from the Whistleblower Protection Act of 1778. I'm going to read it real quick. That it is the duty of all persons in the service of the United States, as well as all other the inhabitants thereof, to give the earliest information to Congress or other proper authority of any misconduct, frauds, or misdemeanors committed by any officers or persons in the service of these states, which may come to their knowledge. And that's July 30, 1778. It was signed by the President of the Second Continental Congress, Henry Lawrence, at the time, of South Carolina. So that's So whistleblowing is legal, but today, the movies I'm describing deal with leaks, right? It was a leak, and it deals with the Watergate scandal. I've talked about the Saturday night massacre that arose as a result of the Watergate scandal. Um, I'm going to do another video just giving us the timeline of this Watergate scandal. I've done a video discussing the Saturday night massacre, as it was called. That's where the president um, was trying to get the special prosecutor Archibald Cox fired, and people kept quitting. We do this in law school, so that's a reason why it was interesting to me. And as I was saying, that this is interesting to me because one, I actually am a lawyer, so I've done a video explaining the difference between a lawyer and an attorney. Right, I'm a lawyer. I got my law degree from George Washington University Law School, um, and that's there's something even interesting about that as well. And hopefully, I don't know if I'll be able to keep this video short because there's so much interesting. There's so many interesting key points in the video that I'd like to touch in this discussion that I'd like to emphasize. Um, so, in addition, I've worked in national security in the Department of Defense, the Pentagon. So I understand this issue of classified information and leaks. I've been trained in it, and in the Navy. And I've also been a whistleblower in that, again, I filed an EEOC complaint that puts you on for instance, even filing a complaint for discrimination, which I did, that protects you. You come under the Whistleblower Protection Act. Filing a Department of Defense Inspector General complaint regarding fraud, that puts you under the Whistleblower Protection Act. So I have done those things, but I was retaliated against. So all these things that I've been talking about, how I was raided, that was a false flag operation, right? I've done videos explaining that, so I'm not going to digress from this video. But I'm just saying that I have experience, right? Uh, how these things work, so I can sort of discuss it properly. And of course, again, I have a law degree, so it's interesting that where I got my law degree from, George Washington University Law School. A lot of these actors got their law degrees from there. So today I'm going to be discussing Mark Felt. So both movies. A central figure in both movies are the Deep Throat. That was the code name, the secret name of Mark Felt, the guy, the FBI guy who leaked the information. So Mark Felt was actually the number two guy in the FBI, and he wanted the top job. And he was the one who was secretly leaking information to Washington Post, to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, right, of the Washington Post. I think both of them are still alive. And so it's interesting that Mark Felt got his law degree from my school, George Washington University Law School. Um, he didn't get the job. Excuse me. He didn't get the job. His boss, the person who got the acting job. So after J. Edgar Hoover. So the thing is, around in the 1970s, around 1972, under President Nixon's second term or so, while President Nixon was president in any event, J. Edgar Hoover died, right? And then they started destroying a lot of records and all that. And so Mark Felt was one of the proteges of J. Edgar Hoover. So he wanted this job, the job, right? So it's interesting that J. Edgar Hoover himself graduated from my law school. Now, there was a guy who was, and then the number two guy under J. Edgar Hoover. I'm just using this bit to discuss my alma mater, George Washington University Law School, right? In terms of law and the government. So J. Edgar Hoover himself, right, the first director of the FBI, graduated from George Washington University Law School, got his law degree from there. His boss, the person who actually hired him, who first recruited him into the federal government, uh, former Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer. A. Mitchell Palmer, he's known for the Palmer raids that violated civil rights. I was going against the anarchists uh, under President Woodrow Wilson's term. He deported a number of people. There were lots of civil rights violations under him during that time. They're known as the Palmer raids, right? So he was the one who recruited J. Edgar Hoover. Now, he was a lawyer, of course, he was Attorney General. he is also an alumnus of my school, George Washington University Law School. So you can see there's something going on. J. Edgar Hoover's within Washington circles, they used to call him his lover. That Edgar Hoover never married, never had kids, but he lived with this man called Clyde Tolson, who was also his number two man in the FBI. Clyde Tolson also got his law degree from George Washington University Law School. Interesting, when J. Edgar Hoover died, both of them used to dress alike. They'd wear the same clothes. They did everything together. They lived in the same home. In fact, when J. Edgar Hoover died, he left his wealth. He actually had substantial wealth. I think almost $1 million. I mean, that's a lot for back then. In the '70s, early '70s, right? Equivalent today will be worth lots of millions of dollars. But it was about over $500,000 was his estate. He left it to Clyde Tolson, right? He left it to Clyde Tolson. So Clyde Tolson was the number two man, became acting FBI director. So for a long time, they had several acting FBI directors, right? So Clyde Tolson was acting FBI director after J. Edgar Hoover died. He also, as I said, he also graduated from my law school, George Washington University Law School. So you can see there's something going on in the FBI and even DOJ with regard to George Washington University Law School. Now, interesting, of course, William Barr is he also graduated from George Washington University Law School, like me. Interestingly, his undergrad was actually from Columbia University. I have a BA from Columbia University as well, like him. Now, he's the only Attorney General, that's William Barr, who served as Attorney General, who once left and then again came again under another president. So he served two different terms under two different presidents as Attorney General. He's the only person, that's William Barr, who's done that. And he graduated from my law school as well, George Washington University Law School. But anyway, back to the 1970s. So, Mark Felt wanted this job because he was one of the proteges of J. Edgar Hoover. However, Nixon passed him over and appointed a guy called L. Patrick Gray as acting FBI director for about a year. He wasn't substantive FBI director. He was acting, right? Acting FBI director. So and Mark Felt was the number two man, remained number two. Um, it's interesting because Gray as well graduated from my law school as well, right? He also graduated from George Washington University Law School. So you can see that at least at the beginning, uh, the George Washington University Law School sort of had a monopoly on the leadership of the FBI, right? Um, and after Gray, who came, a guy called actually Rockall, I think Bill Rockall's house took over. Bill Rockall's house, however, was he didn't graduate from George Washington. He graduated from Harvard. He's Princeton undergrad, and he got his law degree from Harvard. Now he features because he's one of the guys who was involved in the Saturday Night Massacre. I've done a video on the Saturday Night Massacre when Nixon was trying to get the special prosecutor Archibald Cox fired because he was trying to get the tapes from Nixon regarding the Watergate scandal. And everybody was resigning. And so Rockall's house resigned as well. He resigned. Elliot Richardson was the first person, was Attorney General. And, Nixon told him to fire the special prosecutor. He refused, he resigned, and everybody kept resigning. And I've done a video that explains that, so I'm not going to go into that. So the Watergate scandal period was very interesting, was a very interesting period. Now, so what was going on was that um, this was about leaks. It started with the Pentagon Papers, and I've done a video discussing the Pentagon Papers. So this guy called Daniel Ellsberg, right, had leaked the Pentagon Papers regarding the Vietnam War. That was illegal. I've discussed how he was actually charged, but he didn't. The case was dismissed because he violated the Espionage Act. He leaked the Pentagon Papers to the public, to the press, New York Times, showing that, well, the war was not going as that the president was lying to the public, right? And so um, Nixon was trying to, he created this special unit called the White House Special Investigations Unit to try and uh, cover up leaks. He didn't want leaks to get to the press, right? Nixon was a lawyer himself, right? Graduated from Duke Law, very intelligent man, but it was a very, it was very Machiavellian. Let me put it that way. Um, so he creates this. Their nickname was the Plumbers. He creates this unit, White House Special Investigations Unit, made up of ex FBI and ex CIA operatives, notably Gordon Liddy and Howard Hunt. And one of the activities, so they were supposed to look for leaks, sabotage them, just eliminate leaks, whoever it was that was leaking stuff to the press, because he didn't want that. Because, the politicians, our presidents, they're still answerable to the public. And so Nixon didn't want, leaks getting out to the press. So he created this special whatever. So even though these guys were ex FBI, ex CIA, he sort of gave them authorization, especially through the Attorney General at the time, John Mitchell. John Mitchell was the Attorney General. He didn't go to George Washington University Law School. He graduated from Fordham Law School. So John Mitchell was giving he gave this special investigation unit of ex FBI, ex CIA operatives, he gave them access to use FBI resources, CIA resources, and things like that. He was Attorney General. Um, and One of the things that's notably that we know that the plumbers did. So in plumbers, again, that was this nickname for the Special Investigations Unit. One of the things that they did was they went in and they broke into the Beverly Hills office of Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist. So they were trying to get his psychiatric records uh, in order to smear and discredit Daniel Ellsberg, who leaked the Pentagon Papers. And um, Now, the Pentagon Papers episode is different from the Watergate scandal. People normally conflate the two. So, but the same team of people were involved in these two different scandals. So at some point they broke into Watergate. They were arrested. All right, they were trying to break into Watergate. So Watergate was a hotel. I actually worked across from the Watergate as a bank. I worked for a bank. I'm not going to say the bank. I was a financial consultant. I worked at a banker worked across from one of these from Watergate. So it's a famous hotel in Washington D.C. So multi-purpose, variety of things, very huge complex. They have offices. They have a variety of things there. Um, so they try to break in, and incidentally, the Democratic National Committee, they had a headquarters there, and so these guys, the plumbers, try to break in. They did break in, and they were trying to install sort of taps, wire taps, and all that. The security got them. They got arrested. They went to trial. Blah blah blah. So the case was, they sort of suppressed everything. They tried to suppress everything, the information, the breaking in. So that's where Mark Felt came in. Mark Felt, had wanted to be the number one person at the FBI, right? He was passed over. He was surprised because he had been a protege of J. Edgar Hoover, and he was already the number two person, and he thought he was going to be, and he'd been an FBI guy from the bottom up. So he thought he was going to be the number one, the FBI director. However, Nixon brings somebody over him, L. Patrick Gray, to be acting FBI director over him. And he didn't like that. So people think that that was actually the real motivation of Mark Felt, because that he wasn't really, people have said, well, he leaked the information due to patriotic reasons, right? That he saw that the Nixon administration was doing things that were illegal and unethical. And so, out of patriotism to protect our democracy, that was why he leaked the information to the press. But others who are analysts say, well, it's because he had this gripe. He felt jilted, and he was angry that you know, he he didn't get the FBI director's job. Some say, well, he was trying to maintain the integrity and independence of the FBI. Others say no, that that wasn't really what he was trying to do. I was just angry he didn't get the job as FBI director, and he was trying to throw the Nixon administration under the bus. So basically, I'm going to describe what he was doing. So um, part of what he leaked to and the reporters, the Post reporters, were two guys. Bob Woodward, I actually have one of his books. I've mentioned this before, and Carl Bernstein, right? Carl Bernstein. So these were the two. Bob Woodward is a Yale graduate, and Carl Bernstein was the other guy. I think he dropped out of college. He was at College Park in University of Maryland, but I think he dropped out or something. But he had a lot of experience, a ton of experience. So he was leaking. So in the movie, again, it's so Robert Redford plays Bob Woodward, and Dustin Hoffman plays Carl Bernstein. And Robert Redford is so Bob Woodward is the more disciplined, more analytical investigator, because right journalist, because he graduated from Yale, and the other guy is he's more idealistic, maybe more dogged. That's Carl Bernstein, of course. America's very tropey, right? The trope of the polished Ivy League person who's not as idealistic or dogged as the rebellious, more natural, more effusive, college dropout or whatever, who's probably deemed by society to be more creative, right? More idealistic, right? So in any event, so he's leaking. So they part of what he leaked was grand jury testimony. So right away, when these guys were picked up, the attorney general starts to suppress the whole thing. The attorney general was John Mitchell. The whole thing was a lot of things were being suppressed. And by the way, John Mitchell is, I don't know if he's the only attorney general, but I don't know if who was, he was actually prosecuted for this later on for, I think around 1975, for obstruction of justice due to this Watergate scandal. Obstruction of justice is a very serious crime, but it happens in the government. They do it, right? Who's going to prosecute it? That's the issue. So he was an attorney general, and he was prosecuted for obstructing justice and for perjury. He actually was convicted, and he went to prison due to what he was doing as attorney general. And we know this, there are people who do that, right? But he went to prison. He went to prison, federal prison. He got 2 to 8 years originally, and then he was commuted to 1 to 4 years. So he did about, 19 months in prison, in federal prison. Um, and he was disbarred, an attorney general, right? Because he was trying to cover up. He was trying to cover up for Richard Nixon. So because the whole Watergate thing also involved hush money, right? So Nixon created this special investigations unit to be conducting espionage activities on also on the Democratic Party, and he had this enemies list. That's illegal. Again, surveilling Americans, it's illegal if you don't have a warrant, right? You need a warrant to be able to surveil Americans, violates privacy laws and things like that. So instead of investigating the break-in and going further, because that's what the FBI is supposed to do, they were given all orders not to, right? Mark felt they were given orders from the top, the boss, the attorney general, the attorney general and the attorney general and the what's his name, the FBI director, L. Patrick Gray, gave the FBI orders that no, don't look into this, end of story, wrap it up, and they give them the script to follow, right? Because the orders are coming from the White House. And the important thing that the break-in was not to be linked to the president, Richard Nixon, because they were actually working for Richard Nixon, right? So Richard Nixon was lying to the public, right? That no, there was no link, there was no ties. But Mark Felt knew, right? He had the grand jury testimony, he had all of this, and then the link to the hush money, and he was leaking all of this secretly as deep throat to the reporters, to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, and they were leaking it to the press, right? They were, there was press, and they were writing articles about it. The press, they were leaking it, and then there was a hush money. All of that is illegal stuff, but it was not supposed to be tied to the president. So it was Mark Felt who leaked this and let the press know that it was actually the plumbers, that's the White House Special Investigations Unit, that was given authority to conduct espionage activities against the Democratic Party, right, operatives and things like that, and was breaking into people and sabotaging people. They were even going to go as far as assassinating a journalist, that's Jack Anderson. They tied it that it was all linked to Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon was lying, had been telling the public that it had nothing to do, he didn't have anything to do with it. And so it was Mark Felt who was disclosing all of this. So, and of course, ultimately, um, it, ultimately, Congress, which was controlled by the Democrats, right? And ironically, Richard Nixon won the second term in one of the largest landslide victories ever, right? One of the largest landslide victories ever. He won over 60% of the popular vote, but he lost both houses. He didn't even win any. He didn't win anything. In fact, the Democrats increased their control of both houses of Congress, and of course that was why they went after impeachment. So once the information was in the press, the Congress, of course, requested the special prosecutor Archibald Cox. Archibald Cox was supposed to do sort of just a rubber stamp job, not a thorough job, but he was going to do his job. He was investigating. And that was when Nixon now wanted Archibald Cox fired, and he was looking for someone to fire him. Nobody would fire him. Um, Nobody would fire him. And of course, uh, and I've done a video explaining the Saturday Night Massacre. And so nobody would fire him. And of course, eventually, it was clear that Congress was going to impeach and remove Nixon. And so Nixon resigned. And Nixon was the first person to resign, first and only president to resign as a result of this Watergate scandal. And it was, if Mark Felt had not leaked this information, it would not have led to the um, resignation of Richard Nixon. If Mark Felt, because nobody knew, tied the Watergate break-in to Richard Nixon. It was what the FBI knew, right? The And the information was classified, by the way. The information was classified. Now, did Mark Felt break the law? He became a hero. Nobody knew he was one who did it. The only time we came to, the way we came to know that he was Deep Throat, because everybody just knew the person who was leaking, the inside government person who was leaking the information to the press. He had the code name Deep Throat. It only came to public knowledge that Deep Throat was Mark Felt in a 2005 Vanity Fair article. That was just 3 years before Mark Felt died at the age of 95. So he lived pretty long, and he lived long. By this time, he actually had dementia, so his family had to help him. And Bob Woodward, the journalist, confirmed that yes, he was Deep Throat. Bob Woodward confirmed it. So the journalists were able to really hide their sources. They protect and hide their sources, because Mark Felt, was he doing something that was illegal? Yes, he could have gone to jail. He was doing something that was illegal. He If it had been known that it was him, he would have been charged under. He was definitely violating 18 USC section 641, which um, prevents leaks. It's supposed to punish leaks, right? Protect against leaks. So it's and digital data, government records, they're considered a thing of value, right? So it's like conversion. That's it's the same section in the federal code, U.S. code, that actually prosecutes conversion, like stealing, theft of government records, government property. In this case, information like that is considered a thing of value. So the government uses 18 USC section 641 as a thing of value, leaks, to prosecute any leaks, right? Um, but it wasn't known that it was him, um, until, of course, much later on. And of course, yes, the public, is one thing. The public, viewed whoever it was that was doing it as a hero. Um, was he doing it out of patriotism? It would be hypocritical, right? Considering that while he was J. Edgar Hoover's protege, J. Edgar Hoover was notorious for cover-ups, right? He covered up the assassination of JFK, right? He covered up the assassination of JFK. He helped uh, cover up the assassination of JFK, and he did those illegal surveillance of Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders. So, and in fact, Mark Felt himself, later on, he was prosecuted and convicted for his role in break-ins, illegal break-ins of the Weatherman, right? The Weatherman uh, gang that were known as I think they were also known as Weather Underground, but they were also called Weatherman after Bob Dylan's lyrics, his music, his song, The Weatherman. So they were classified as a domestic terrorist group that they were Marxists, they were militant, and they were seeking the overthrow of the U.S. government and other things. Although they were also against racism, they used bombings. They bombed the Pentagon in 1972 or so, right? So and later on he was convicted for civil rights violations, because he they're breaking into their homes without warrants, and so he was convicted. Even though he was convicted, he was pardoned by President Ronald Reagan. He was pardoned by President Ronald Reagan. So you could see there's hypocrisy. It wasn't about really protecting the Constitution, because he was violating uh, constitutional rights all along, as a as an inside FBI insider, right? My name is Olurotimi Osha. I'll stop this video here and I'll continue, because this is very interesting. I'll get into the nuance of whistleblowing and Mark Felt. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.